We'll now move on to look at arrays in JavaScript, which is slightly more complicated than what we've already looked at. We're still dealing, remember, with variables here, so this is going to be a variable type, if you like. An array in JavaScript can just be assigned to a variable as you would with the var keyword. But let's go ahead and look at how we would create these. There's two main ways that we can go ahead and create these, and we'll also look at using just the array array notation, and then sort of append values onto arrays. But essentially, an array is a data type in JavaScript that lets you store a list of particular items within it. So let's just take a look at creating an empty array, or creating an array with a few values in, maybe console logging it, just to have a look at what it looks like when we output it to our page, and then how we can sort of access each item of the array, and how we can append things to arrays as well, and things like that. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called names, and that's going to be this empty array. So this is 2 square brackets like this. So let's go ahead and refresh here, and we'll type in names. So we can see that we just have an empty array here. So we can say type of names, and we get type of names, and we get object. Now that's a little bit strange because we're talking about arrays, not objects. Objects is going to come later in this series, and that's what we're going to look at later on. So why is an array an object? Well, it's stored as an object, but it's still treated as an array. So it's a little bit confusing because the typeof will give you very strange answers sometimes. But just think of this as an array. An object looks like this, just for future reference. So now what we can do is we can start to build up the list of things that we actually want to include in our array. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say Alex, Billy, and Dale. Now notice these are all string values and they're comma separated. Let's go ahead and look at what this looks like in here. And there we go. So we get 3 string items within this array. Now what happens if I wanted to also include a number in here, or a few numbers? Well, when I go and refresh, this is perfectly valid. This will let us do this. We can include a mixture of different data types within an array. We can even include objects within an array, so I could place an object at the end of here. And don't worry too much if you're unsure about what an object means. It's absolutely fine. We don't really need to know this just yet, but we can include a variety of different data types within an array. Now what happens if we want to add an item onto an array? Or actually, first of all, let's take a look at accessing elements of an array. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with my standard array with 3 names. Let's say I want to get the first element of this array. I use the name of the variable, and I use the square brackets with an integer in here. Now this integer represents the index that each of the items is at, and arrays in JavaScript are 0 index, which means that the first element has the value of 0, the second has the value of 1. So when I hit 0, and that gives me Alex back as a string. When I type 1, that gives me Billy back. So instead of it being 1, 2, 3, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to however many we can store. So this is how we access elements, and we can also set values like this as well. So I could say name 0 equals Joshua, and then I could say names, and that gives me Joshua, Billy, and Dale. So instead of now the previous value, I've overwritten that value by referencing it by its index number, so that's 0. So not only can we do that, we can add items to the array as well. So we can do this one of 2 ways. We can say names 3, which is, remember, is 0, 1, 2, 3, so the element that doesn't exist. We can go ahead and set that to another name. So when we say names now, we see that we've got an additional value on this array. We can also say names.push and then a value, so Joshua. So now we can say names and we get the additional value on there. And names.push, you see, has returned 5, and that will return the amount of elements in the array that we have, by adding this on. Now, what about if we want to actually remove an element from this array? We can use the splice method on our array object, if you like. So what we can do is, when we say names, we get our names here. As long as we know the value or the index of the item that we want to remove, we can do names dot splice. Oops. We provide we can say array dot splice. We provide the array. We provide the name of the array, and then we provide the element that we want to remove. So let's just say we want to remove Billy. That would be 1. No, we do need to do names, splice names. Okay, so now if I was to choose names, you can see that Alex has been removed. That would be at position 1. So we've removed the element here at position 1. Oh no! What we've done? Okay, let's start this again. So let's go ahead and refresh the page. So I'm going to say names. So I've got Alex, Billy, and Dale. Let's say I wanted to remove Billy. I'm going to say names, which is the name of the array that we want to splice, and I want to remove Billy. So I want to choose the index, and then I want to choose the amount of elements that I want to remove. So for example, let's say names.splice, I want to choose the index, which is 1, and I want to remove 1 element. That's removed Billy. So what this splice method has done is it's returned a new array with the items that have been removed, which is Billy. So now when I choose names again, we see names without that. So this tells us what's been removed, and this tells us what's left. So let's take a look at this in another sort of light. So I'm going to say names, Alex, Billy, and Dale. I'm going to say names.push, and I'm going to push on Joshua, and then I'm going to go ahead and push on Ashley. So now names contains all of these. Now let's say I want to get rid of Billy and Dale. I would say names.splice, and I would choose the index that I want to start at, which is 1. So this starts at Billy, and I'm going to choose 2 to remove. That's removed Billy and Dale, and now names is left with Alex, Joshua, and Ashley. So that's how we create arrays in JavaScript and modify them. But obviously we've been doing this all in the console. We could do this exactly the same within our code. Everything I'm writing within the console can be done just the same within the code. So let's just take a look at what we might do here. So I'm going to remove Billy. So names equals names. So remember, we're reassigning this value. That's really, really important. So names equals names splice 1 1. So that's removed Billy. Now let's go ahead and console log names. There we go. So that's removed Billy. So names now is equal to what's been removed. If we remove this, we now get Alex and Dale. So remember, that would probably be more appropriate, var removed or something like that. But we don't need to do that. Splice will just update the original array anyway, because splice is a method on this names object, which is actually an array. So that's the way you sort of think of it. This object has different properties, but it is an array. So let's say we want to add Joshua and Ashley. We can do this one of 2 ways. So we can say names dot, and then we can say push. So we could push on Joshua, and then we could do exactly the same thing and push on Ashley. So then when we go ahead and look in our browser, you'll see that we've got Alex, Dale, Joshua, and Ashley. Now this is a little bit strange because we're doing the same thing over and again, and we might not want to do this. So what we can in fact do is we can choose a comma separated list of values within push that we want to add to the array. And this works in exactly the same way, and it just makes our code a little bit tidier and writing less code basically. Now, if we want to go ahead and add on I don't know, Sheba, for example, we can go and instead we can, if we know how many elements in our array we have or which position we want to add on, we can say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we know that we can add one on at position 4. So we can say names 4 equals Sheba, and that will add Sheba on. Now, what happens if I want to change a value in an array? So let's say I want to change Dale to Billy. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say change Dale to Billy. I'm going to say names. Now what I can actually do here is, rather than access this as rather than sort of do anything clever, I can just say names where it's a position 0, 1, names 1 equals Billy. And there we are, it's changed. Now, there's something else that we haven't quite looked at, which sort of leads us on to working with objects, and that's having an associative array, which means that we have the indexes are actually named values. So let's just say we want to change this array and we want to create an element on the end of this. We won't really have this make sense, but add named index to end of array. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say names, I don't know, this could be absolutely anything, color, for example. We could say color blue. Now, what do we think this does? Well, usually we would define an array or access array elements using their index. What we've now done is we've added a named index. So this has now become partly an associative array. So when we refresh, we can see that instead of just another element, we've got color blue. So how do we access this? Well, we know that names contains all these values, but what happens if we actually want to go ahead and access this names.color? We can do this, names.color, and that gives us the value blue back. And we can do the same as this within objects, so it's exactly the same way. So hopefully this examples of arrays has given you a good understanding of how we create, how we append to, and how we modify and splice, remove from, and then add named indexes to arrays in JavaScript.